not getting into like the nuts and bolts, but kind of understanding like like perceive it as a trajectory where you want to learn and go to, and don't be afraid.
Yeah, and I love that you wrap the putrefaction versus fermentation, because I think that's a really important thing to understand. Both work. Like, the dairy farmers in Connecticut and up the Connecticut River Valley, they take all of their cow manure, put it in these huge lagoons that just absolutely burn your eyes when you smell them or go by them, and they apply that stuff in the spring, and it's just horrific to breathe for about a week. But it works. The corn grows and everything is fine. And then on the other side of that coin is natural farming preparations where you're actually fermenting them. They don't have that putrid smell, but they still function extremely well. And so, again, great way to put it, Craig. It's like you can't be afraid of it. I mean, yeah, you don't want to eat raw manure. The smell is there to warn your biological system not to.
Yeah, the nose knows, right? And that's the thing about it. Like, if you've ever
Yes.
made pickles or a product, right? Like a good pickle, like crisp to it, right? Little bend, little crunch, a little sour. And someone figured out that if you like submerge your organic matter and you pitch a ton of salt and you create these conditions which lead to a good fermentation, right? Lactive fermentation is one example, And then if you've ever done a fermented product, oh, this kind of went off on one side, right? Oh, it's like not crunchy, it's mushy, it's kind of broken down. I didn't salt it enough, right? It's like the joke is when like like my friend, like he's Korean, and he explained that like when his grandmother and all the other granny and his mom would get together to make kimchi, right? Like they would the Napa cabbage. It's like no cheating. You got to put the spice like the spice and salt mixture between every single leaf to kind of get it thoroughly broken down. Because yeah, like these anaerobic environments, if situated in a certain way, can lead to it, right? And it's been really exciting where a lot of natural farming, a lot of Korean natural farming, a lot of jadam really is kind of highlighted where like there's a principle. And I think even two more with Jadam um, is really is like the back like Master Cho's son. I'm not going to butcher the name. I'm just going to refer to it as that. Most people understand who I'm talking about. Had a background in like horticulture, plant science, and chemistry, and like understood that these basic principles to do it. And then even people like Nigel Palmer, I believe he was like an aerospace engineer at one point or an engineer, put together the regenerative grower guides to amendments to kind of, okay, we need to test and understand these things, right? And that, yeah, and that's the thing about it. Like the same way of someone saying avoid that completely is very much the same thing as that can't happen. And, there's a reason why that happened with Elaine and like politics and different details. But if you're trying to get people on these regenerative techniques and making a lot of these inputs, farmers will just go do stuff. They'll go do stuff. They don't, even if they don't got the information right, because they don't have time to waste. So where there's a lot of nuance and a bit of a learning curve, yeah, like sometimes you want to discourage someone in a certain way, but you have to provide that reason. But it's exciting now that, especially with like, I'll just call it bio-intensive, right? Because the whole thing, KNF, natural growing biodynamics, soul food, yada 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 yada. They're all trying to do the same thing, right? The tribalism happens again. You just have to realize it's an entire constellation or basically galaxy of different areas, basically in the same plane. So it's pretty exciting.
Leif, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah,
that was just
going back to the when Craig was talking about the importance of just doing things and observing them. I think just observational techniques and getting hands-on experience is extremely important, and it's something that I'll get out of touch with when I'm doing more formal science research, because I'm trying to really like understand how a system's working. I'm reading a bunch of scientific papers, analyzing data about like some process going on in the sediment, and then it gets all cerebral and conceptual, and then like some usually I don't do it enough, but might be a few days later, weeks later, I go out to a lake or a stream, and then I'm just like digging around in the rocks and looking at things, and it's like, oh, this is where it's all happening. I can read, all the papers there are to read about like this biogeochemical process, but if I'm never actually going and sticking my hand into the muck or walking in the muck or digging
Yeah.
it up and seeing what it looks like, then I'll get completely out of touch with it, and it starts to become this abstract, like what's the point type of thing. So I think, no matter who you are, keeping a consistent routine of having that kind of embodied experience of not just observing but physically interacting with the ecosystem you're working in, whether you're some ecologist in the rainforest characterizing species, or you're a farmer running a farm interacting with your soil, or you're just someone who has a nice hobby of composting or whatever. It's like that. Nothing can replace the hands-on primary experience of actually physically interacting with nature and the system you're working in.
And that brings up another great point, is that in my experience growing up as a kid, I loved playing in the swamp. But I would, step off one of these floating islands and I would sink up to my, thigh in mud and then pull my leg out and be like, whoa, holy cow, that smells like hell. Of course, I'd get home. My mother would hose me off with the hose outside, freeze my ass off. I still want that shit in the house. But that's important. That's a digestion of organic matter, and it's going to later on feed the stream or feed the, if it gets flooded, wash down and create a compost tea. So, again, all of these processes are super important. And they, as long as you understand that, I don't want to say there's nothing bad in nature, because there really isn't. It's just a process that we humans get stuck in, and we get exposed to this. It's bad. We're going to get cancer. We're going to get sick.
Yeah.
I think that's
it's kind of a thing. I think the one trend you see is that usually where there's an opportunity for an organism, it's because there's a deficiency, right? Because a lack of a community